everybody. Welcome to the Snow West Show. I'm Ryan Harris. Real quick before we get into this episode, the Snow West Show is made possible thanks to Polaris Snowmobiles. The Polaris Gift the Outdoor Holiday Sales Event is going on right now. Find the perfect gift for your loved one or for a Polaris fanatic with offers up to $3,000 off on select mountain sleds at your local Polaris dealer. Also, right now, you can take $50 off $250 purchase or $150 off a $750 purchase on all parts, accessories, and gear during the Gift the Outdoors Holiday Sales Event. Go see your local Polaris dealer to gear up for this upcoming riding season. Also sponsoring the show is 320 Guest Ranch, located in Big Sky, Montana, only 5 minutes away from Buck Ridge and Carrot Basin. 320 Guest Ranch offers lodging and accommodations for your next snowmobiling trip. Single cabins, large cabins. These full cabins have kitchens available. Check it out at 320ranch.com. Thanks also to Fly Racing for sponsoring the show and helping us bring this content to you. Fly Racing is the #1 gear brand in Supercross and Motocross, and they bring that same product innovation to snowmobiling. Whether it's monosuits, helmets, boots, gloves, goggles, Fly Racing has got you covered for your snowmobiling gear head to toe. Check them out at flyracing.com or at Fly Racing Snow on socials. And thanks to Deviant Ink for supporting the show. Head on over to deviantink.com. Check out their custom wrap builder with their new interactive design tools that make designing and customizing wraps super easy. Their new colorizer tool randomizes color combinations until you land on the look that you love. Then you can try the design mixer tool to see all the Deviant Ink designs in the colors that you've selected. Check that out and more at deviantink.com. Thanks for being a listener. Now on to the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Snow West Show. I'm your host, Ryan Harris. We are here today with Mark Staples with Gallatin Avalanche Center. But first, joining us to my left, Justin Stevens, Snow West test rider. Broc Genta over there, also Snow West test rider. And then we have Mark Staples from the Gallatin Avalanche Center. And Bruce Kerbs. I always get you guys mixed up. Jeez. Bruce Kerbs. Anything with a B, I'm going to say one or the other.
You about called me you.
I did. And I already said your name. Bruce Kerbs, Snow West test rider, Polaris certified technician and
long
farmer.
Time ago.
And currently waiting for snow. Oh, how's that Arctic Cat build?
What Arctic Cat build?
Well, you you went and bought an M or a
858.
858.
You
M858.
probably drink a little more Celsius. I'm learning your words a little.
I'm working up to it. So you went and picked up an 858 for us to test because
yes.
we don't get a test unit.
Right.
So tell us about that. You actually picked it up a couple days ago.
Yeah, picked it up Friday, hauled it home, and then unloaded it in my shop. Took it out of the crate. It's still sitting with the skis off, no shocks.
You haven't PDI'd it yet?
I haven't PDI'd it yet. So
how do you unlock it if you build it yourself out of the crate?
They give you an unlock code, so you just got to start it and cycle through the menu on the thing and put the code in, and should be good to roll.
All right.
So excited.
Right. Well, that's going to be a test mule.
Yeah.
That'll be good. I hope you guys get some miles on it.
I know. It'll be fun.
Soon.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon, yeah. You could probably go road riding somewhere.
I'll bet Black
this
Canyon
week.
you could go.
Do you think there's some snow up there?
Probably enough for road.
It got dusted a little bit. Target got quite a bit of snow. And then, Steve Martin, did you see?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, holy cow.
That was 2 weeks ago.
No, I thought that was just yesterday.
Oh, he went again.
Oh, did he go again yesterday?
No, but there was he just was showing a snowstorm. I think that storm went through there, and he had a good 4 inches on his deck railing and back porch, unless I'm mistaken.
Where's Steve Martin at?
Evanston.
Okay.
So he rides all the backside of the Uintas.
Yeah, Wyoming got hit pretty hard.
God, maybe you hurry and build that thing. Let's go.
Roll.
Okay. We got one of the Polarises too. Oh, and we got all the Skidoos. So.
2 o'clock today?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Tony, if you're listening, we're not doing the podcast today, so you got bumped. All right, Mark Staples. So you were just telling us you moved up to Bozeman, Montana last summer.
I did. Well, this summer.
This summer, 2024.
Yeah.
To take on a new role as director of Gallatin Avalanche Center. What were you doing before that? You were down in Utah?
Yep, I was down in Utah as the director of the Utah Avalanche Center for 9 years. And then I had been up on the Gallatin before that as a forecaster there.
Okay. So how do you get into this? Like, do you go to college to be an avalanche forecaster? I didn't see that degree.
No, I don't know. You know, it's not a straightforward path. Certainly, I was just like, man, I just want to be outside in the snow. You know, kind of like you guys.
So, do you have a ski background or snow?
I did grow up skiing. Yep. I mean, you know, and then, you know, I did see the light at some point, you know, a bunch of years ago. I was like, I got 2 skis out there. I just got a motor and a track attached to them now.
You ski uphill.
I still ski. Sometimes on one, sometimes on two.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what led you into that avalanche forecasting?
Well, this is kind of corny, but like I wanted to get out. I mean, I really don't care the vehicle, the snowmobile, the skis, whatever. I don't care. I love being out in the mountains. And so I was like, well, I should learn something about avalanches. And the first time I dug in the snow, my eyes were this big. I just, you see it's all white. You think it's just all one solid homogeneous mass. But when I learned that like there are all these layers and it's a complete record of all the weather through the whole season, and you can unlock that by just running your finger through it and seeing those layers. I was so fascinated. I was just like, this is it. This is like, I'm in. And then I had gotten an engineering degree.
That explains a lot.
Well, but I didn't want to sit in an office, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so then I actually went back to graduate school and got a master's degree at Montana State University, and just studied snow. Like it's another material, like steel or aluminum, and it's got certain properties. And just dove in head first. And then concurrently, I was working as a ski patroller. Which if you want to see avalanches, like that's the way to do it. And you're up at sunrise on top of the mountain with a backpack full of explosives. I mean, that's cool.
That is.
Add a snowmobile and it'd be like the coolest thing in the world. A snowmobile and a backpack full of explosives, like triggering avalanches.
That's cool.
Let's do that.
Like 007.
Let's go explode
Let's do it.
something this year.
At 3?
No, there's not enough. There's not enough
We
there.
don't have to explode
Unless you want to
snow.
explode your 858.
We can try. It's warranted for 2 years.
Okay, there you go.
Oh,
you're not
man.
taking that one in RMS. Hey, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Here's a box.
Yeah, right.
So when you did your graduate degree, what did that focus on? Not engineering, but what focus did you have, or was it an engineering degree?
It was an engineering degree in the civil engineering department.
Okay.
And it's a heat transfer problem.
Okay.
It was in civil, but it's a little more mechanical engineering based. And I was using some finite element methods in this software package that actually my advisor, my professor, he had worked with the DoD and the Army and the Air Force because they want to know if you're the Army, you want your tanks to be able to hide. And if you're the Air Force, you want to be able to see the tanks. And he worked with them to put this landscape around these different vehicles to figure out what the heat signature would be. And he was doing it, well, A, because they had funding, and B, because he's like, well, we can apply this to avalanches.
Interesting.
So we were looking at how the sun and the clear, the sun heats it, the clear sky cools it, and the air temperature and the wind and all these things affect and create these weak layers and how they're distributed. And with a software package, you can run just 1 million calculations in the blink of an eye.
So talk, go real in depth on that. Like, just what does a typical snowpack look like, and how does that, like, from the first fall in October or November, say that snow stays on the ground, and then the layers build up on that. Just a typical snowpack. Like, how does that grow and build, and what happens? Sunlight.
Well, unfortunately, now that I'm in Montana, the typical snowpack is not quite as deep as it is in Utah. No, but I think the cool thing is what we try and do with avalanches is most people have a good sense of these things, and my goal is to sort of translate what we kind of already know and what does that mean for avalanches. And so I think we're all familiar with like that early season. Well, there's the early season snow, like when I'm just going for a road ride.
Yeah.
And then that snow will get kind of rotten, and then as the snowpack builds, people are. You just barely bump the throttle and your track's down on the ground and that rotten snow underneath. So that's the depth hoar, the weak faceted snow, and we'll get avalanches on that. And then through time, it gets a little deeper, and that weak layer slowly heals, and we see fewer and fewer avalanches. But that process happens slowly. And then sometimes we can get a weak layer that forms on the surface of the snow, and then that can get some snow on top of it, and we can get avalanches on that. And then, you get to spring, and then the top of the snow starts getting a little wet, and then it refreezes at night, and then you're dealing with, you're going down the trail in the morning, you're dealing with overheating and stuff. And then, later in the spring, the whole snowpack gets wet, and then it refreezes, and it goes through the melt freeze cycles, and then it melts away, and we go into our summer activities. But the tricky part is just the timing of all those things. And in terms of avalanches, like how all those things come together really depend on what we're going to see. And what we want is just for the switch to turn on. I like to say Thanksgiving is a good time.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a little early snow to get excited, but if it can stay fairly dry until Thanksgiving, so we don't get that early snow that sits there and rots. Yeah. And then Thanksgiving, if it just turn on and doesn't have, just a little every day, just builds it up.
So that would be an ideal snowpack, is to not have these long periods of sun bake in the snow or a rain right in the middle of right after like mid-December or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be ideal.
Like
kind of get rid of those layers, or
3 or 4 inches every night, sun during the day.
Yeah.
What do you want the first snowfall to be like? Wet snow that kind of the snow bond to earth? Like what type of snow do you want on the bottom?
The bigger issue is typically in the Rocky Mountains, it's going to be cold and dry, and it will stick to the ground. The one thing about the ground is the snow is a blanket, and when you dig down, like when we do, and we put thermometers in, and we do all that stuff, it's always 32 degrees right at the ground. Uh-huh. It'll stay unfrozen because the snow insulates it. Yeah. So really what we want is we just don't want a handful of storms, however many, and then for that snow just to sit there. If it can just keep steadily building up, that's the best case scenario. And then all those layers will just kind of compress and bond to each other. But when it sits there, it turns to sugar, it turns to facets, a bunch of different names for it, rotten snow. That's the main thing.
What's the difference in, like you were talking about, I know Utah is probably deeper snow, but is it a drier continental snow versus not necessarily like coastal snow, but even Montana? Like if you go from Seeley Lake to northern Utah and then to Colorado, you're dealing with quite a bit different type of snow.
Totally, yeah. So we in the avalanche business, we classify those as sort of 3 climates: the maritime, which is the really deep, thick, heavy sort of coastal snow, intermountain, and then continental. And continental is defines Colorado. Colder, higher elevation, maybe a little shallower. And then sort of Utah's in the middle. It's kind of the best of both worlds. As you move a little further north up into Montana, you can go over more towards Seeley, and it's going to be a little bit more intermountain, a little wetter, a little lower elevation, a little warmer. And then other parts like Cook City are going to be a little higher. Not necessarily drier, but yeah.
So we're more intermountain, I would guess, like Island Park area?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of coastal, or not coastal, in a, what's the other one?
Continental. Yeah. It can go either way.
I'm losing it here. Too many words to start with the same letter.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we see the same thing every year. It's just like...
True. That's what I was going to ask you. It seems like there's more avalanches lately than when I was back even in high school, and I don't know if it's just the sleds can't get as high and triggering them, but is that just climate change? Like, what's causing more avalanches, you think?
I think we're just hearing about them.
Yeah. Sleds are getting into the backcountry, and
sleds are getting there, and everyone's got a GoPro or a phone, and we're getting pictures and videos, and through social media, we're hearing about them. So
gotcha.
I think they've always been happening. I mean, not as many if people can't get there. But.
Right.
It does. I do remember back in the 90s, you'd hear about an avalanche every now and then. Mm-hmm. But, man, it took a while to hear the story. Right. It was weeks after it happened before you heard it. But
now it's an hour after.
But I do. There's got to be some aspect though of access, like the machines today with 3-inch tracks and factory turbos. Like we can get on snow before it's had a chance to stabilize.
Right.
Does that tend to lead to more avalanches?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, the longer the longer you let it sit, the more chance, it has to bond and stabilize. And now, like, what are the limits now?
Yeah.
So what is
They're none.
talk about like a layer, like a worst case scenario layer where you get a buildup of hoarfrost or something, and then you get new snow on top of that. How long does it take to heal that layer?
That's the real dilemma, is that these weak layers can form instantly, and then it takes a long. I mean, it's like relationships. It takes forever to build them, but you can break them overnight. So, and really, what scares me, I think the worst case scenario is when you get early season snow, and then it sits, and then you get that rotten depth hoar facets sugar snow on the ground. And then you start putting snow on top of it. But before you really have what you'd call a base, before it's supportable, when your track is still breaking through the ground, like you just can't get up high enough. You're still worried about hitting rocks, and that keeps people in check a little bit. And avalanches are easy to trigger on that layer. So I mean, you do see some accidents then, but definitely with snowmobilers, when I'm the most nervous is you've got the weak layer at the ground, and you start putting snow on top of it, which we call the slab. That's the part that's going to come crashing downhill. As that gets thicker and thicker to within where now all of a sudden you got traction, and you're not breaking through. You're not thinking about it anymore. Avalanches start to get a little harder to trigger, and those are the cases where sometimes, and maybe you all have like heard of accidents where a hill had a bunch of tracks on it.
Right.
And it took one person just hitting it in the right spot, in a thin spot or something, and then it gets triggered. So that's when and then as you go further, it gets thicker and thicker, and things have more time to heal. And we'll still occasionally hear about a couple monster avalanches that happen, but the likelihood is really going down. It's in that middle zone where you've got good traction, you've got what you would consider a good base, but it's not obvious. And a lot of times that's when the gates are really open. It varies with different parts of the country when that is. February maybe, the snow is good. You've got a better base, better traction, but maybe the hazard is still elevated, and you can put some tracks on a slope until someone, rides by a buried rock that you can't see or something. Huh. And we're not patient. I'm not. I'm like, I don't see any avalanches. Looks like we're good to go. Look at all those tracks.
Yeah.
What are the big warning signs to watch for on a day like that where it looks good and there's tracks all over and there's a little bit of fresh snow? Like I always kind of watch for noises in the snow or fracture cracks ahead of me or something like that. Are those good indicators?
Yeah, or bad indicators. Yeah. And one thing that you've probably seen, but once you really clue on it, you see a lot more is when you're ripping around. Like if you're parked and someone rides up and you get that whoomp or that collapse, that like you notice that. But when you're boondocking and ripping around, you may not hear it or feel it, but occasionally you'll see a little just a little sapling sticking out of the snow or a tree branch, and when that snowpack collapses. And you probably wouldn't hear the whoomp because you're pretty full throttle. You might see a sapling just wiggle a little, and so that's one of the things I'm looking for sometimes.
So that snow settled and it's created that branch to come out of the snow,
pops up, or just a little sapling wiggles like that. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
But if it's doing that as you're riding or as you're coming to a stop and you're hearing that a couple times during the day, what's that telling you?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is an avalanche. All the processes that cause an avalanche are happening right then. The only thing missing
is the slope.
It's not steep enough. Yep. So that's Mother Nature just screaming out like, "Hey, stop!"
I remember, and this was a long time ago. This is probably So we were on revs. So I'm going to say like 05, 06, when the avalanche education wasn't nearly as big as it is right now, and Dan Adams and I met up with Chris Brandt. This is like right around the Jackson Hill climb in spring. And we rode, Mosquito Creek area in Wyoming near Jackson Hole. And we were up and there was a big downhill roller, and Dan and I were standing on that. And this is just how we used to roll. I was holding my camera and I was downhill just a little bit from the crown. and standing there taking these pictures of Chris and Dan as they were jumping. And Chris came over and, I mean, Big Air Barant, right? Like this guy was flying down. And he landed, and I was standing there, and all of a sudden I just dropped 2 inches. And the whole thing just kind of sank. And then behind us, the next ridge over, the whole thing just slid.
Wow.
And we're just standing there watching him, and all these thoughts running through our head, like the mental process slowly, like, there's really no reason why this one didn't slide, but that one did. And so these light bulb moments just kind of go off, and you're like, okay, not doing that again.
And when that happens, like, you don't have to know anything. Like, the ground just like moved.
Yeah.
Like, there's something primal that says like that's not good.
Yeah.
So, talk about some of the on snow experiences you've had. I mean, you've been involved in some recoveries, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And what?
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though,
Yeah.
talk about what it is being an avalanche forecaster. Like, what do you do out on the snow on a snowmobile for this job?
Well, the main thing is we watch. You can't do it from the office. You got to get out there. Doug Richmond.
Thank goodness, right?
I know, right? I got to find another job if we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Just like snowmobiles, you can't test them in the lab, can you?
Right. Try.
How long are you going to let that 858 just sit there, Bruce?
I don't know. Maybe next week it happens. I got a river down close. I can go try it.
It ain't going to mend those bumpers itself.
No, it's not. It ain't got a very good bumper on it either.
Well, yeah. So the main thing is we watch the snowpack. Like one of our forecasters is just down on top of Sawtell Peak just last week. And we'll walk out on snowshoes, skis. We'll ride up a road, to get break-in miles on a sled, and we're just going to watch that snowpack evolve from the beginning to the end.
Nice.
And we'll go out, and then as it grows, we're digging all the time. I mean, Mike Wigley, who started Mike Wigley heli skiing at this conference one time, he stood up and he said, "I'm not a professional skier. I'm a professional digger." Because that's what it takes. And to be honest, that's what I do all winter long. I dig holes.
Nice.
Not because I'm stuck. I do plenty of that too. But so then later we just dig down and we're tracking all those layers in the snowpack. It really helps. We mentioned like hearing about more avalanches. When people tell us about avalanches they triggered or they saw, we can correlate that with different layers and see the timing of that with different storms. And so it's really just creating that log book of all the storms, how they landed, when there weren't storms during those periods of high pressure, and what happened to the snowpack. And then when you add that all up, plus all the photos and things that people send us, we can sort of put together a picture of what's going on.
But you do that daily.
Daily
journal.
Yeah.
Daily journal.
Yeah. I mean, every avalanche forecaster, when they're laying there going to bed at night, they're like looking at the weather, like, what? Oh, let's see, it snowed like 3 inches already. I mean, it's nonstop. And you got to stay on it.
That's cool.
But I mean, that's what we all do.
Yeah.
Checking the snow.
Yeah, we dig lots of holes with this group.
That is true.
Yeah. And then, there's certain tests we can do. We cut out blocks and bang on them and stuff. It's pretty crude, some of that stuff. I mean, it seems like we should have something more scientific, but you just can't get away from it. You isolate a column of snow and you put your shovel on it, you bang on it and you see if it breaks, how it breaks, if that's the layer you were thinking. And then of course, if you see an avalanche and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's pretty clear proof.
So watching your videos, I've always thought this. You guys are sitting under sometimes the crown or a fourth of the way down and you're digging and avalanche danger's high. Like, do you ever get nervous like, all right, we're in the path of this avalanche if it goes, or do you pretty much kind of play it safe off to the side? Because sometimes you watch some videos, you're like, man, I hope that don't slide on you guys. You know what I mean? But maybe you're in a safe zone that you can't see.
We're usually in safe zones. Yeah. So if we're at an avalanche that has released, if it broke all the way up the hill, then it's all gone, and we feel pretty good there.
Yeah.
If there's still a chunk of snow left, we won't go there.
Gotcha.
And then the number one thing we do is we rarely get on slopes steeper than 30 degrees. We might go under them depending on conditions, but we spent, and a lot of classes when I go out with snowmobilers, when we actually measure, we're not good as humans at estimating the slope steepness. The snow conditions, the trees, dense trees, open areas, deep snow, hard snow, it all and flat light versus clear sun, it all affects our perception of how steep a slope is. So, and I practice all winter long. I keep a little device in my jacket pocket, and I'm always stopping and measuring, and it starts to tune my eyes a little bit. But when I go out with the guys and I'm like, hey, let's, look, this is 29 degrees right here. Like, you can ride this all day long, no matter what the conditions are. And 29 degrees and like some decent trees and deeper snow, like that can be challenging. Yeah. At least for me. Yeah. But it's fun. You can have a lot of fun. Yeah. You're just getting right up to that line. The margin can be razor thin, so you can't mess up.
And the sweet spot, it's probably the wrong word, the bad spot is 30 to like 38, 36.
Yeah, when we look at avalanches, most of them happen in that like 38 degree slope angle range, but really the better number to focus on is 30. That's where you sort of cross the line into terrain where avalanches are going to happen. When it gets really, really steep, like in some of that stuff you see like skiers doing in Alaska, it's so steep that the snow's just constantly sloughing. And so it's, in theory, that's a little safer, but eventually there is an apron they have to get on too. That's 38 degrees. So, 30 degrees is that line. And that's tough because that's an invisible line.
Right. Yeah. And a never-changing line. I mean, you're riding across something, all of a sudden it's like this, and then it's this, and then it's back, and so it's hard to.
It is, yeah.
To watch that.
Yeah. And modern machines just go anywhere. Yeah. And snow bikes don't even care what the steepness is. Yeah. When they're going across the hill.
Yeah. do trees? How big of an impact does a tree zone make on a say 34 degree slope? Do trees make it safer? That's
a good question. The easy answer is no, they don't. They don't make it safer. We see plenty of avalanches in the trees, and in a lot of cases, they make it more dangerous because now there's something you can run into, or you're going to be, if you get knocked off your sled, an avalanche can be going 25, 30, 60 miles an hour really fast, depending on the size of the slope, and you're like a pinball. Right. So they can cause a lot of trauma. And this is a tough one. I struggle with this because avalanches happen in the trees all the time. But there's no doubt it's safer down in the trees than up in the big bowls where the wind is blowing and stuff. Yeah. So for just various reasons, you're out of the wind, they're a little safer. The snowpack is a little different. I don't dig in dense trees as much because you get the clumps of snow that land on the branches, and those fall down and those kind of interrupt things. And it's just a different snowpack. You can totally get avalanches in there, and it just depends on the type of avalanches and the conditions and the danger. So, I mean, the modern sleds, although they've given us this ability to go out like in the middle of the storm on the deepest of days, that has made it more dangerous, I guess, because there's no limit on where we can go. Mm-hmm. But I think their agility has helped. Where now it's like, 90s, early 2000s, we certainly saw a lot more people parking in a bowl and high marking. Right. And then someone will get stuck, and someone will go up and help them, and then two people get caught in an avalanche. And now, like, the people are like, well, that's no fun. I'm going to go down here in the trees. And I think that has helped and kept people away from the most dangerous terrain.
How much impact do you think, when I think about the trees, you said the snowpack's different, and I'm also thinking like this, so the sun's going to hit it different. A lot of time it's shaded. Yeah. At night, does the frost affect the snow in a heavy set of trees as much as it does at an open area? Because I'd actually be kind of curious to see how different that snowpack is compared to like an open bowl, because we ride a lot of trees with the intention that we're being safe.
Yeah. So so it's warmer. So oftentimes at night when you have trees, that clear sky. Oh, you've been out when you walk out in the open, you're like, whoa, that's cold. Yeah. And that cold sky. So snow is what we call black body. It in the IR spectrum, it absorbs, it reflects all the visible light. That's why it's white. Right. But in the longer waves of radiation, it absorbs 100% of it. And but that also means when you have a clear sky, it emits really well. And so at night, especially here in the fall, it can be, temperatures can drop down into the teens Fahrenheit. But the snow, if you go out and measure the snow surface temperature in the middle of the night under clear skies, it'll be way below zero. Huh. It just dumps heat like crazy. So, to your point, in the trees, they kind of keep it a little warmer. Yeah. And so the real thing I look for, and maybe we can talk about this later another time, is when you're riding with a group, it's not just like dense trees the whole way. There are often these little clearings.
Right.
And if you get to one, maybe it's a little more of a clearing. That snow had seen different weather because it doesn't have the shading of the trees. You can get, and especially if it's a little steeper, it's not hard to be just ripping through the trees, and you come to that slope, and the problem is before you have time to really think about it, you're already crossing it, but the real danger is that maybe your buddy's stuck back there, and now you're out on that by yourself, and
interesting.
That is what I worry about when I'm riding in the trees. And one thing I've talked with a bunch of the guys around here that teach riding clinics is that those riding skills tie right into avalanche skills. If you can, being able to go wherever you want and you decide where you go versus the terrain or the sled dictate where you go, then you can come up to that clearing and you can stop. And you can look back and be like, oh, wait, where's Mark? Right. And you go back and help me get unstuck. And then you can come up and you can deliberately okay, I'm going to go over there. And you move on over. But, if you're just barely hanging on with your arms out like this and you can't, you're not a very good partner in a lot of ways, not just with avalanches.
Right. Well, it's hard, though, when there's 2 feet of untracked powder in that clearing.
I know.
And no one's been there yet.
Yeah, yeah.
It is hard when you say you pull up there and you just go. It is kind of how your brain works. You come through the trees and all of a sudden there's a clearing and you can not think about the trees for a minute. Nobody's touched it. So
yeah,
but you got to be smart all the time, right? So
yeah, if you can just if you can just stop for a second. That's why I carry a little device in my pocket. I can just stop. Yeah. Measure it, and I'll be like, oh, look, that's 28 degrees. I'm going to tear it up. Not even think about where my buddies are. But I've had
before
that time.
They get there.
I remember one time just by West Yellowstone, a buddy of mine were out, and the danger wasn't too bad, but we were going along, and I just remember I went past this island of trees, and I just looked to my left and just saw an open, empty slope with no tracks, and I didn't even think about it. I just turned uphill. And then he had turned up before this little cluster of trees, but then the trees ended, and next thing I know, we're both going up, and right up under these big pillows of, wind-blown snow right under the cornice. And we both looked at each other like, oh, darn. We're smarter than this, but.
Yeah, that's like an eerie feeling. I've had that before. We were riding up I didn't even realize what it was. We were just shooting up through something, and I get about halfway up, and it's almost like the sound changed. The sled sound changed. I'm looking around, I'm like, what am I doing? But it can happen quick on these sleds. You can get into a spot, so you got to be smart all the time, I guess. So
you're going faster than you can think.
Yeah.
So Mark, what's this little device that you carry to test the angle? You referred to it a couple times.
I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
You have to go to engineering school and graduate school, or you don't get one. So
I don't have the degree for that. I'm sorry.
You wouldn't know how to use it. You'd be all upside down.
Is that something that a construction guy or a farmer could use?
You probably have one in your trailer. You just don't know it.
I've got a square.
Can't you get your siding estimator out on your app and just be like, okay, that's
what's that?
You could probably tell how many square feet we're dealing with.
I could do that, but the angle? Is that a 12-12?
Exactly. I know. Civil, people working on roads, they talk about percentages and stuff like that. Yeah. No, it's on every phone. You can get a device, inclinometer to measure slope angle. Inclinometer.
Yep. Write that down.
He's going to ask how to spell it in a minute.
No.
I-N.
Just put incline-ometer.
I got it.
Does Milwaukee make those?
They probably
That's
do.
a good question.
Oh,
They make about everything.
I heard they're going to start making.
Speaking
snow
of,
beds.
I've got Milwaukee tools in the back of my pickup. I probably should leave. They're probably
I was
stolen
wondering
now.
because
Oh, no,
I had
you
some
had
stolen,
top
so I
there.
thought maybe you stole mine, but I was going to steal them back.
If those boxes weren't red, they'd be a lot harder to notice.
Right.
You just got to park next to someone who has even more tools and better tools.
Well, we are in the ghetto here in downtown Idaho Falls.
It's like grizzly bears. You don't have to be able to run faster than a bear. You just got to be able to run faster than your buddy.
So you mentioned snow bikes though. Like we used to be really heavy into snow biking.
Yeah.
Nate King and I especially. And are snow bikes safer because they're less of a footprint, or are they more dangerous because you're accessing gnarlier terrain?
Well, we don't. I guess we have. They haven't been around long enough to really like have good data on that. One day at home a number of years ago, I had a bike, sled, bunch of skis sitting in my garage, and I just, I was like, well, I'm just I grab a tape measure and I just measured the footprint of all of them and the weight. And what I thought was interesting, just now, once you're moving through the snow, it's different, the pressure you're going to put on the snow. But just when you're parked, that static pressure, I just measured the surface area and then the weight. And I don't think it was intentional, but they're all, like, whether you're on a pair of skis, a snow bike, or a sled, that static pressure is about the same.
Because of the footprint?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the bike has a smaller footprint, but it weighs less. Sled is a little heavier. It's got a bigger footprint. And a sled and a person standing on skis is pretty similar to a snowmobile sitting there.
Because the ratio of that weight of a skier, for example, that's over a very small area, so the pressure's similar? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yep, it's all pretty similar.
I never
So, but
That's because of engineering.
That's right.
yeah, but where did he come up with that? I mean, Mark came up with
Justin's holding out on it. He's been playing dumb all these years.
Yeah, it's getting dumber.
Yeah. The thing about snow bikes, I think it's yet to be seen, but and sleds are getting here. Like, you just live in what we call terrain traps, creek bottoms and stuff, where the worry there is just a small avalanche has bigger consequences.
Right.
And that's where you live all day long on a snow bike. Sleds are pretty much going there now. And the only thing I've wondered about with bikes, though, is, we don't advocate for this as part of like your avalanche training, but I think a lot of guys do trigger stuff and either like hit the throttle and get away from it off to the side or turn downhill. I mean, there's YouTube's full of videos of crazy stuff happening. And I don't know what percentage of snowmobilers are able to get away from an avalanche, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to do that on a snow bike. I don't think you have the acceleration, and then I don't know exactly, being on one ski, I don't know if you have be easier to get knocked over right when the avalanche breaks. So hard to say.
Yeah, interesting. All right, you made a good point there too. Like we live in an area, a world of terrain traps, and if you listen to some of these, not everybody, but there's people that are making money off of avalanche safety, and with that comes sales pitches, right? And so the presentation on some of these avalanche seminars and some of these avalanche awareness things gets a little over the top, in my opinion, like a little too definitive. Like, you're going to be in an avalanche at some point in your life. Like, you're going to need all this equipment. But this is a sport that we're all choosing to do, and we choose to do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And if we took all the advice of the safety absolutists, we just would go golf in the summer, drive to St. George. Right.
Yeah.
But we want to be out in this terrain. We choose to be out in this terrain. We need the education and the awareness, and we need to have the right equipment.
Yeah.
But we don't want to avoid the risk and the fun. We just need to be aware that there's a risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've struggled with that. I've struggled with that. Like, we want to be enablers.
Right.
like the goal is to ride more, and I find it hard just myself sometimes. We're like, when I say we, like avalanche forecasters, we're the deliverers of like doom and gloom, and oh, it's so bad. There's so many ways you can die, but like no, like really, we want to be like, no, you can go out every single day. If you learn the types of avalanches that are happening and learn how to read terrain better, and my hope is that and I think we're getting there. You have to scare people a little bit. Or people have to get scared on their own. You have to have your own experience. But the ultimate goal I want is, for me, I go out all the time on those dangerous days when it's high. My favorite quote ever was this guy told me, he goes, well, the only good days are the red days.
Yeah.
That just means it snowed a ton.
Yeah.
And so you just have to adjust what you do.
I like that though, because I think that what you're doing is awesome. We pay attention to it, and it's been kind of fun to. Before, like you say, we just try to avoid maybe huge snowfalls and or at least avoid certain areas when there is a huge snowfall. So, it's nice to have a resource to go to and just kind of get a leg. Because there are a few days where I'd say when you guys put out a forecast, you're like, maybe not today. Like, it's just not worth going, And granted, yeah, you could go ride some meadows, find some areas to ride, but maybe if you had a group planned, or maybe like we talked the other day, maybe a different group. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's certain groups that you'd want to go out with on certain days, maybe certain groups you wouldn't. So, I think that the resource that you guys are providing is awesome. And I do think it's all part of this awareness of avalanche safety, making better decisions when you go out. I don't know, but I think it's invaluable for sure. So well, and I think it's doing a lot of good.
Choosing mountains, like especially when we're out in Island Park where we do a lot of our riding, you can go
there's
go west or you can go east, and we'll look at avalanche.org and kind of see what the forecast is for both directions, and go be idiots on the west side, based on what the forecast is over on the east side.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
When you go do the forecasting, does your data go to avalanche.org or does it go to somewhere other?
Everything goes to avalanche.org. Yeah. So you can get everything you need to know. If you know nothing else, go to avalanche.org. And you'll see all the colors of all the different areas, and you can click on them.
And then if you want more in-depth stuff of specifically what you're doing, you can kind of follow you guys on social media, right? Because I think that's fascinating. Like, I try to follow with Snow West Magazine all of the different avalanche centers, and a lot of you guys are really good at showing what you do and how you do it, and that just that visual of you guys doing that daily just drives home that point of I got to be aware of this every time we go. Yeah.
Hopefully that helps. But the regular forecast, that's the product that goes out every day with the danger rating, and you can get more avalanche.org. You can click on that, and any area where you're going, you can just click on those polygons or those areas that are colored.
I don't know who mentioned it, but someone mentioned something about the groups that you ride in and avoiding avalanche danger. I know, you look around the room right here. All the years of riding snowmobiles. Before there was, real good avalanche information out there, we all probably rode in some of these areas that we wouldn't ride in, now when it's red or whatever. So, how big of a factor is knowledge and experience of being out? The amount of miles that we've had. How big of, is that a huge factor?
What do you mean, like a huge factor?
Huge factor in avoiding avalanches. Because we've all been out, riding a ton in these areas.
Like does experience account for some education on its own? Just the experience of having ridden so many years?
Exactly.
Yeah. It helps a ton, because I think a good educator, someone teaching a class can link together, though, instead of like presenting this totally new thing to you. Everyone who rides a lot knows so much about snow conditions. They understand how their track is reacting with the snow, and they can feel different layers in the snow. And if you can just, if you can connect what we're trying to teach with avalanches to that experience, I think that's the real holy grail of a good class.
Right.
Yeah, that is. So when the catalyst that really drove the avalanche stuff home for me was, and I think this is common for most snowmobilers, when you know somebody who was caught in an avalanche, or somebody who died in an avalanche. And unfortunately that's happened to, I think, most everybody that is a a real enthusiast backcountry rider probably knows somebody who has either been buried or has been lost in an avalanche. And for me, it was Josh Roth. God, I can't remember the year specifically, but when we lost him, like he came into the office just a few days before he went out and got caught in an avalanche, and we had a fun little conversation. But it's those things that are these turning points, and like you said, you got to scare people a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's when you have that close knit somebody that you know, or 2 or 3 degrees of separation, somebody that you know, where you start to pay attention to this. But I'm guessing you've been out on some recoveries that you probably can't get out of your head. But when a snowmobile or a group of snowmobiles are involved in an avalanche, what is a recovery process like?
It's hard. And I, kind of like you're saying, I do carry all of those stories. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm lucky, but I've gotten an education from speaking with the members of the group, going out and like literally like riding in the exact tracks of the victim. And like, you know, sometimes it's the next day or sometimes it's that afternoon, like feeling the wind on my face, seeing what they saw, seeing the avalanche. And that's an education you can't buy. And I lean into it because I know I carry all those stories with me when I ride. And I like to think that helps me like come home to my wife and kids every day because I don't forget that stuff. And I wish there were other ways we could motivate ourselves, but sometimes hopefully it's just close calls that we can do with. But, I'll give you an example of one was in near Big Sky. I actually had written the forecast that morning and I'd seen a bunch of avalanche activity in this one group of guys. They rode into this area called Onion Basin, and anyway, they were all kind of side hilling along, not up on the steep slopes, but under them, and I think one of the group was stuck further away, and then the 2 guys who kept going, they were both caught in the avalanche, and the one guy, Kenny, he died. And then unfortunately, and this I think is something that is a real struggle snowmobiling is because one person was stuck, the other person was caught with just his hand, and he had to dig himself out. So by the time they get to Kenny, it was too late. So then they had to ride out that night or that afternoon, and I think the next morning, somewhere during the day, I got a call from the local search and rescue, and then it was already getting dark, so we organized that night and had a plan for the next morning, and then I was flying in like first light the next morning to go get Kenny, and I was hanging out there, and we were kind of getting everything packaged and getting ready to take him home, and then we brought him back. But then I think it was the next winter. I was his son, I think, was with him. His son had been stuck, and then his son's friend was the one who was partially buried. And then he had another son who was at home who didn't go riding that day. But then the following year, I was teaching an avalanche class with those 2 boys. And I just remember we were sitting there in the snow, and we'd done all the practice and everything. And we were just taking a break, and I'm just sitting there. And the one son who had been at the avalanche, he's describing his, and he could kind of tell the full story a year later, a little bit more. And then the other boy was just saying how he wanted to sleep in that morning. And man, that is just, it's so, I don't want to make it sound like it's a positive thing, but it's just so powerful. I just remember like sitting there, the sun was shining, the wind had stopped, and it's just a calm, quiet day. And I'm sitting there with his 2 boys, and we'd just gone through this avalanche training, and I'm the student most of the time, to be honest, in these things. And I learned so much from all these people. I just wish it wasn't tied to these tragedies.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things are life-changing for sure. And we've all been through that experience. Well, I was going to ask you, when a snowmobile is caught in an avalanche, that's different than like a skier or a snowshoer because you have a 500-pound, 600-pound vehicle, and its rider, and sometimes those two get tangled up. But say you're on a slope and an avalanche starts, and then you get caught up in it and you start tumbling. Where does the rider typically go in relation to the snowmobile? Like if everything settles and you can see a ski tip sticking out, where's the rider typically going to be from that?
That's a great question, because this can speed up your rescue. You know, you're trying to get organized. It's confusing. It's a chaotic moment. And every avalanche I've been to, what I can say is, often the snowmobile, part of the ski or something, the snowmobile, even though it's heavy, it's so big, it's kind of like a can of mixed nuts or a bag of potato chips. When you shake it, the big objects come up. So it's not about weight, it's about the size of the object. So snowmobiles, often you'll see something. It won't be totally on top, but you'll see something sticking out. And the rider is almost always either downhill or uphill of the snowmobile, but kind of in that, like, sometimes the avalanche line. Sometimes it flows straight downhill, sometimes it flows and maybe makes a little bit of a turn, but in that path that the avalanche takes, the rider is, if you see the snowmobile, go right to there, and then, hopefully they've got a transceiver on and all that stuff, and you can get to them, but you're going to be close if you go to the snowmobile that they were riding, and then they're probably either going to be uphill or downhill from that. And so that's it. Hopefully you see then like a part of their hand sticking out or their airbag or something, but that'll get you real close.
What's the success rate? Wrong term again, but on avalanche airbags, like how much does that increase your odds of staying above the snow or at the surface?
We're probably due as an industry to have another in-depth examination of that now that they've been out longer. But some of them, it's been a while since some of the more recent studies were done. And big picture, they'll save about 50% of the people who would have otherwise died. Huh. It's complicated though, because some people are going to get caught in an avalanche and they're going to die no matter what. Some people are going to get caught in an avalanche and they're going to be spit out. Like I was caught in one time. I just ended up on top.
Huh.
And
with your bag or without?
That was before
the bags.
They were kind of new, but yeah. So it's hard to tease through the data. I'd say and I think Matt Ince was talking about this on one of your podcasts. And it was in 2012. He was caught in a slide, and he waited to pull his handle, and it was too late. Like, you can't do it once you're tumbling. Yeah. So I don't know how often that happens. I do know, well, in this case, the avalanche I was talking about near Big Sky, Kenny, he had an airbag. He wasn't able to pull the handle. We think it wasn't like a real extreme side hill. They were kind of, but I think they might have seen it coming, and I don't think this is unreasonable. They're just like, they hit the throttle. They wanted to get away from it. Like that's not a bad strategy. But by the time the avalanche hits, like in Matt's case, you're tumbling and you're probably not going to be able to pull it.
Yeah, you probably don't realize like once you start flipping and rolling, how disorienting, or even just the ability to bring your arms back in, or it's got to be tougher than you think, I'd imagine. So
it is. So
interesting.
There's a certain percentage. At one point, the number was about 25% of non-inflations, either due to mechanical failure, which is probably rare now, or just people being unable to grab the handle. It's going to really make a big impact in increasing your odds of survival. Even if you're fully buried, a lot of times like a tip of the airbag might be sticking out, and now your buddies are just like, oh, there he is, and they've sped up.
Well, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. Yeah. And they're making them, I mean, yeah, it's great. Like Climb's making snowmobile specific ones, and there are all these electric ones and other versions, so they keep getting better.
This is going to sound like a terrible question because of all the awareness and education that we have, but I know somebody is thinking this because I've heard this asked and I've heard this commented on social media, because it comes down to money.
I know where you're going.
Better to have a beacon or an airbag?
I would take an inclinometer first over anything else, because then I know I can avoid avalanches. Because I think of an avalanche, and this is a whole separate topic, like how do you avoid them in the first place? I think of it as like being in a car wreck going 80 miles an hour, and the car's like flipping up and down. Like, At that point, you're just not sure how it's going to wind up if you're going to survive. And so I take the inclinometer first to avoid the avalanches. I take the transceiver second, because if I'm riding with my buddies who know how to do a rescue, I know that they're going to be able to find me. If I have an airbag, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to deploy it. And I might still get buried. And if I don't have that transceiver, they're not going to find me. So that beacon that's the one surefire way we know we can get you.
Well, I also look at that if you ride up on a party that's got guys buried and all you have is a avalanche backpack, you don't have nothing to help in the rescue. So I agree with you on that receiver. It'd be the thing to have.
There are a lot of days I don't wear an airbag when we're in down in the creeks and trees and stuff on small slopes. Something that's just 30 feet tall, it's just gonna kind of like slump down. And for an airbag to work, it has to.
Right.
I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you should have all your safety equipment. But the avalanche has to get churning a little bit for an airbag to work.
Yeah.
To raise you to the top, right?
To raise you, it's like
because of the size.
Yep. It's got to shake things a little bit. So that's the other case. It's not going to work in a small avalanche. Now, ask me what I should have done. If I'm caught in one of those small avalanches, whether an airbag works or not, I would have said, "Oh man, I wish I had one." But yeah, so it doesn't help you. To answer, getting back to your question, airbag may not help you in those cases. Well, there was these events are just burned in my brain. There was a really sad avalanche, 2019, I think, just outside of Farmington in Utah, where an 18-year-old boy. It was a terrain trap by definition, but it didn't look like it. There was a lake and a steep slope above it, and he was carried down. And it's a terrain trap because it's a sharp transition. The debris comes down and just stacks up on top of it. Right. It doesn't have it can't kind of keep running and fan out. So he was buried. He had an airbag and it was inflated, and he was still buried about 6 feet deep.
Wow.
Man.
But I think that's a fair question because, like you said, obviously you'd want to have everything.
Yeah.
But
totally.
If it came down to money, or maybe first year, second year, and then I guess you got to adjust your riding based on what you feel like you have as far as safety equipment. But I love that you say the inclinometer first, because really when it comes down to it, all the safety equipment's awesome, but that doesn't ensure that you're going to survive an avalanche. So the best way is to not be in one in the first place, right? Just avoid it altogether. So interesting.
Yeah. And really, it's your partners are the ones. Doesn't matter how good you are or whatnot. It's all about what your partners, the gear they have, and what they can do for you.
Right.
All right, I got another question for you.
All right.
What's a better type of shovel? A plow shovel or just a regular shovel?
The plow? Do you mean like the hoe?
Yeah, a hoe shovel.
Yeah.
Not plow. But the hoe type where you can make a right angle with your blade.
Well, those you can use them either way. Mm-hmm. So it certainly doesn't hurt to have one of those, because then you can switch back and forth.
But is it better to have one of those that you can do both? Like, can you move more snow in hoe mode? Like
in hoe mode.
This show's going to go downhill real fast. But
I know this topic has come up in some other your podcasts. We got to come up with a better term. No,
I don't want to change it. It's fun to say.
Yeah, no, it's definitely better for sure. Especially, I think it's usually people are still studying different techniques, ways to organize and do the shoveling, because that's the majority of the work. And I think usually the person in front, like right on top of the buried person, might have it in the regular shovel mode, and then I think the consensus is the people right behind him would have it in that hoe sort of mode, so they can, because really what you're trying to do, and it doesn't matter how your shovel is configured, what you're trying to avoid is lifting the snow up and then throwing it out. You want to sort of chop it and dig and just sort of sweep it back.
Use gravity to help.
Use gravity, yeah. So that having that option is really helpful.
All right, another one for you. I probably got a lot of these. what transceiver are you using? Like, is there a difference in brands and a difference in the premium, the Bluetooth, the?
Oh,
Who are you
gosh.
sponsored by? No.
Yeah.
Are you sponsored? Are you sponsored by Avalanche Equipment? Are these?
Oh, they're all really good. That you go back a whole bunch of years, you have to pull out a little earpiece and stick it in, and now they've got like 3 antennas and all this processing that filters out weird signals, and you can flag. If you find someone, you can flag their transceiver and ignore it, and go find the other one. They're all really good.
So if you got a 6 or 7 year old transceiver, you're outdated, right?
Yep.
Timed upgrade.
That's the one clear thing is you just want to have new. I mean,
So you don't want to sell your old one to your buddy?
how much do you like them?
I always keep a bag full of old ones, and if nobody has one.
You want him to have the new one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You take the old one. Yeah. But the one thing I will say, you probably hit on the most important thing, and that's just to upgrade your gear. I mean, with smartphones, who wants a device that's 5 years old?
That's good comparison.
Same with sleds. But I like simple. I've tried different models with advanced features, and if you're some of these like heli ski guides or ski patrollers are out there every day with large groups, and they might have like multiple burials and really complicated stuff going on, and they're like on the clock working every day, and they practice multiple times a week, then those advanced features are helpful. I don't have time to do that. I mean, I try and do enough practice, but I just know, I think, at least for me, I'm going to be like stressed, scared, confused, and I need something I can just pull out and just tell it to start searching.
Yeah.
Without I don't need special functions. I just want just to switch to search and go.
Does a newer transceiver block out cell phone interference?
They're working on it. I don't know for sure. I just got a new one by Peeps that supposedly I've heard good things. Supposedly it helps. It's got one of the antennas you kind of flip out, and supposedly that starts to push the antenna a little further away from if you have a Apple Watch or some kind of smart watch, or it just pushes that a little further, and it's got some technology in it that might manage interference. But I know that they're working on it, and in the coming years we'll probably see they improve that. But one challenge though is I don't think the cell phone is as much of an issue as the sleds themselves. And
you mean interfering?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just to be clear, the greatest interference is when you are searching. If you're buried and your beacon is transmitting, you have to almost have something like right on top of it.
It's a pretty clear signal with the transmission.
Yeah, if you just have a little separation from anything from your transmitting beacon, you're good to go. So if you're carrying your cell phone, I've heard Dan talk about advocating keeping your phone in the handlebar bag. That's great, but I sometimes will just put my phone down here and my beacon's up here, or vice versa. And that's plenty of separation. It's when you're searching that you need more distance. And so that's where a snowmobile, especially now with the different displays and things, they've got, even though a snowmobile might be off, there's still
The GPS.
Yeah,
power.
some of those big gauges run for a few minutes after you shut the snowmobile off too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's no guarantee turning the snowmobile off is an answer. You got to walk away from it.
What kind of interference does that cause? Is it going to prevent you from honing in on a beacon, or it's just going to pull you off track for a little bit?
Yeah, so it'll two main things. It'll reduce the range. So I might not pick you up until I'm if I didn't have interference, I might be getting your signal. If I didn't have interference, I'm not going to pick your signal up until I get a little closer. So that's one, reduce range. Two is and this is a bigger issue. It can sort of create ghost signals. So you'll be like, oh, I'm picking up their signal, and you go off, and then it kind of fades, or you just never seem to get close to it. That's the more problematic one.
And you're wasting time because you're getting confused and
Totally. Yep.
Interesting.
But distance, just separating yourself, is the key. The hard part is, so snowmobiles even though they can, a lot of it's related to the power, the current going through something. So the advantage of snowmobiles is it's not hard to walk away from. The scarier thing are things that are hard to, when it's hard to get that separation. So heated gloves, if you're holding your transceiver with a heated glove and the heat is on, you're sort of wrapping those cables around the transceiver. So you can't, you'd have to either take your glove off or have someone else do a search. That's the harder situation, is when you have wearable things that are hard to get distance from.
Interesting.
Yeah. So watch. There's some kind of ring, isn't there too? I don't know. There's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's heated vests. I just saw some heated underwear, even like just their base layer stuff that's heated, and so depending on
the electric goggles, snow fog goggles.
True.
Yeah.
Granted,
We've got this halo of stuff. This cloud. Remember what was the kid in like Charlie Brown who had like the dust?
Yeah, dust. Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah.
Dusty?
No, it's
Pigpen.
Pigpen. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got this like electronic
That's what we look like.
Cloud around us. So and every manufacturer is different. Some if you're buying something off Amazon made and who knows where, I don't think you might be at more risk than like a local company that's more involved in avalanche stuff. They might have done some testing to see if their products don't cause too much interference.
That's good to know, though, that it has more to do with like an electrical current. I guess I always thought it was like more of the cell signal going out and causing confusion. But
my understanding is it's the screen draws the most power, so it's more about just the power draw than the actual like signal going and coming. But it's hard though. Some of the PEEPS engineers were saying that it's hard because they're even the same, like an Apple iPhone, whatever model, like they're constantly sourcing different components to keep their costs down. And it might be the same model, but they might have different components. So it's hard to do some of the testing to like say, this device causes this interference.
Interesting.
I got another question for you. And if you guys got any, jump in. And if we need to wrap up, we're a little over an hour, but
oh man,
we can wrap up here. You got to get on the road.
I got some sleds to get.
Is your wife outside waiting, or what?
She gave up me a long time ago.
Okay. My last question is future tech with avalanche equipment. Like, where do you see this going? Are there like when you deploy an airbag, could you shoot a nylon rope 100 feet in the air and just let that kind of float and follow you, and then have a hard line to the recovery, something like that?
Wow, that's a cool idea.
I'm full of this.
He didn't come up with it.
His wife did.
She's worried about you.
Patent pending.
Yeah, no kidding. I like that idea.
Have you ever seen? There's an old video, like the Warren Miller ski films has it sometimes. There's a bunch of skiers going downhill and they got some balloons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've thought about that, or some liquid that shoots out that would trail down as you fall down the hill and create a line like to your location or close to.
I want to see Ryan riding with a balloon on a string.
Or like a big lithium polymer battery that splits open the second you get buried and melts all the snow.
Ooh. This is like we're going to the Marvel universe now.
Wow.
How about one of those bubbles that just wraps around you entirely?
There you go. Yeah.
There was some couple people over in Europe. They reached out to us. This seems far fetched, but I think this could be possible at some point, sooner than we think. They were talking about. I'm not sure if I'm blending together my sort of aspirations with this, but like, there's an avalanche, someone's buried, and you just pull out your transceiver, and it's like a drone at the same time. You just flip it in the air, or maybe maybe you got to unfold the arms, and it flies over and it does the search and just lands like boom right there. To sort of take, now we're just the labor.
Right.
We're gonna go dig.
Can't get a couple of Tesla robots out there to do that.
There you go. Yeah. Maybe
Hey, my riding buddies could be Tesla robots instead of you guys. Ski pole.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's interesting, though. That would
That's too
that
much
would
of
reduce
that.
time by.
That idea is too much, Kevin.
Yeah, that's funny.
That drone idea is cool, though.
I bet they can do it at some point.
Yeah.
Just throw it out there. Go find them.
there's a lot of time that it takes to set that up and to start looking, and depending on where you start looking can change it. That can increase the time significantly.
Well, I always worry about crap you got to charge because I'm terrible at that.
Right.
It's bad enough with camera equipment. Like if you're preparing to go out and shoot the next day, you got so many things to remember to charge.
Yeah.
And then my drone transceiver would never be charged.
Leads me to a question. They always say have full battery on your transceiver. What does down to 50%, 60% of battery life do? How much does that diminish that signal to find somebody?
I think it should still work like normal.
Okay.
At 50%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just depends on how much you care about your buddies.
Yeah.
50%, 60%.
Right. But no, I always got told you want 80 to 100%. You want full battery.
Yeah. I don't know. I've heard different things over the years. The different manufacturers, when they recommend, maybe it's buried in the manual somewhere. I mean, I start the season with fresh batteries, and then I might just change them once midway through.
Yeah.
And they last for a while.
Yeah.
Unless you forget to turn it off.
You got a souvenir from...
Yeah. Have you seen one of these before?
Oh, yeah. we do a few of those a year. Running boards.
I've only seen them broken. Actually, that kind of looks like the one that we pulled off last year.
Yeah. So hopefully a few people have hung in there with us this long.
I can tell you rode for a while after it was dead.
Yeah. No, I think with this one... I think we splinted this to back. I think Dan Gardner rode this one out for me. I just couldn't. we were deep in there, and he just danced his way out, and he was like, "Just get on my machine." But so I bring this broken A arm to a lot of classes because my main point is we're good at this. We're good at breaking them.
Yeah.
But when this happens, we're good, because we got time. You never, you don't, I sometimes carry some in the truck because they're easy to change. And I'm prone to breaking them. But you don't have a spare, you've got limited tools, limited supplies. The one thing you have, your one resource is people and time sometimes. And so you can stop, all right, how are we going to do this? How are we going to fix it? How are we going to splint it or whatever, brace it? And, what I consistently see with snowmobilers is that when we do a training, man, I mean, just by the nature of the sport, you got to kind of be able to figure stuff out. And with just the littlest bit of training, I've seen so many snowmobilers get really, really good with avalanche rescue. I mean, really good. And I think it comes from just this innate, being able to figure stuff out. The challenge is in this case, the broken A-arm, you got time and you can figure it out, make a plan, and get out. But when an avalanche happens, you don't have time to figure it out. And so that's my main point: is you gotta do this all on the front end. And the saying, I know a bunch of people say it sometimes, is no one rises to the occasion. You fall to your training. So, yeah. So ending on a positive note here, I think with just the littlest bit of training, most folks that I've been around riding, they get really good really fast.
I like that.
What level of training would you recommend that people get? I mean, obviously there's just the classes that people put on at Rexburg Motorsports or some of your local motorsports dealerships, things like that. And then I know there's actual classes, or do you get into the Air One and move through those classes, or what would you recommend?
Number one is on the snow. You got to get on the snow and do some sort of training. And and if you had a class 10 years ago, well, you got to get back on the snow and you got to even at least practice with your buddies. So number one is you got to do it on snow. And then a cool concept I liked that I remember Dustin Pancaria and John Summers were talking about with the Avalanche Alliance was thinking about education as a path and not so much as just check, done. And wanting to in part with their scholarship program, helping people get on the path. So it's not a one and done thing. It's you're just lifetime learners. So that's what I would recommend. Get some training on snow and get on the path.
Yeah. And I'm a big advocate of at least these seminars like Skidoo and Mike Duffy. They do a great job
Yeah.
at covering the snow belt with free 1 hour, 2 hour classes. And Mike does like on-site
Yeah.
beacon searches
Mm-hmm.
with sawdust piles. Like
Yeah.
it's better than nothing in my opinion. Like if you can
Yeah.
do that at least, that gives you a little bit of information so that you do have something to fall back on if
Yeah.
something goes wrong in the background. But the more you can do, obviously, the better.
Yeah. And then you can take that. You can go out on snow and just do it on your own. Like practice the same thing, but do it like with interference. Like do it with, see what happens when you have all your devices going. Learn what it's like to do this with your gloves on and all those things.
All right. Well,
All right.
we'll let you get back on the road. I know you got to get down to Logan and pick up some stuff. So Mark Staples, Gallatin Avalanche Center, thanks for coming on. Hopefully we can get you back on a few more times because there's just so much good information here to talk to. And I know you had mentioned you had other things that we could talk about and maybe make this kind of a regular thing.
I could listen to that all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that'd be great.
Good
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. We're going to be, we just started forecasting for up here around Jefferson and Centennials last year. We're going to be
And thank you for that because that's our backyard and it hasn't been on avalanche.org up until
Yeah.
now. So we appreciate that.
Yeah. Well,
One
thanks.
more zone covered.
Thanks to you guys, everyone. There's been so many people that have helped us. The Avalanche Alliance certainly has brought together a lot of companies. We've gotten some funding through them. I mean, that money has gone directly to forecasting for the Island Park area.
Awesome.
Cool.
Weather stations, all sorts of stuff. So we're all in it together.
Yeah, that Avalanche Alliance has brought in a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's helped the motorized side of things for sure.
It's a different landscape these days, so it's cool.
Yeah.
So
So-
thanks so much.
Yeah, go find that Avalanche Alliance sweepstakes. I know they're giving away a 2024 Arctic Cat M600 this year. Enter for that. All of the money that you use to enter for this sweepstakes goes to these programs, to scholarships, to equipment, to training, trickle down, and it benefits all of us. But Bruce Kerbs, Broc Genta, Justin Stevens, Mark Staples, thanks for coming on.